I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint, your host. With me today is Daniel from Christian Remedy and Law, the YouTube channel. Today is the 19th of March, 2014. And today we're going to sort of step back and talk about a variance of different things that bind us into the system, and whether or not they are actually us or whether they are just an impersonation of us. The reason for this is simply because I received an email asking the very same questions that we're going to be posing today. Let me give you an example. After the email, here is what the sender of the email actually asked. He said, I have a son as well that wanted to ask a question. He says, I am a nearly, so he's 16 actually, a nearly 17-year-old boy who does not want to have anything to do with the government. My parents got me a birth certificate and a social security number. I was forced into getting a worker's permit, a bank account, and filing for taxes. And will be forced to file again if I don't do something before the tax deadline. Yes, how would I go about opting out of taxes and or claiming to be basically, if you will, deceased is the word he uses, which is probably not a correct way of going about it because technically he's already acting dead. So I can get out of the system. So the question is, how do I get out of the system? He also says he read the SSA-521 form, which is the form to nullify the original application of Social Security. And he says, I'm displeased that they will keep all of my information on record. Is there any way around this? If I send that form in, am I still a citizen? If so, why not? What should I do? This is a commonality amongst many people who are in the system, basically. So, Daniel, welcome to the show, and let's talk about this because I sent you a little list of things that were questions from these folks. The mother and father. And then, of course, there's the son who's realizing at a young age, thank God, I wish this would happen more often, that, he's about to turn to the age of consent. And obviously, probably realizes that he doesn't want to consent to all of this. So, again, welcome to the show, sir.
Greetings, Clint. Another Wednesday.
Yeah.
Well, that's a deep rabbit hole. I think we have to go at the beginning and start to understand what that social security or social insurance program is.
Sure.
Now, when I sign into something to be a participant, we have to understand that there's going to be what I would consider, if there is a legal name involved, there's going to be legal implications. There's a difference between being a participant and a non-participant. There is a difference between what we call private and then what we call public interest. And I think people are confused about the idea of the public interest because they don't realize that public means tax. So if you're involved in the public, you're involved in a direction that says you want to say with what they do with the tax money, that you are involved in attaching to yourself with a taxable name. So let's consider that back in the biblical times, the publicans were tax collectors. So we pretty much know that when we use the word public, I don't think putting the N on the end of the word is going to change the word. It just kind of directs it more to the fact that we're probably more so publicans involved in the use of tax money, something that's taxable. And something that's taxable relates almost to a royalty. So if I am the royalty and you're using something that belongs to me and you would like to infringe on it, I'm going to give you a license and permission to do so at a cost. So I'm going to accost you. And if you do not cooperate, after you've joined into the idea of the club of the membership, I have the right to pursue you, hunt you down for what you owe that belongs to me for the use of property that is not yours. So in the Social Security program, what we're doing is we're entering into a permission to apply to be in the use of someone else's property. And we're going to have to understand who's really controlling the Social Security program, because there's something to do with eminent domain that needs to be explained to the listeners so that they are no longer confused on this matter. Because the people that are involved in eminent domain, which would be whoever controlled the part of the public of their name, which we've explained in a previous show is the surname, that surname being public taxable property, state property, not private property, when it's in use, can actually be disposed of by the eminent domain of the powers, the monarchies, the kings, the lords, those that control that property. They have the right under eminent domain to convey and transfer and pledge their alienable property, their imagination, their made-up name, to a third party who has the right at that point to charge for the use of it if they're in debt to a third party. So maybe we've entered into a third party in this contract because we carry all third-party liability. I'm sure that term comes up in the United States as it does here in Canada. It is required for people to carry third-party liability. So it would imply we're part of a third party. So I guess the big question is who's the first party, the second party, and who's the third party?
Yeah. Well, it's important to say, too, that Social Security in and of itself seems to be just basically an innocent pension fund for old age and for Medicare, Medicaid, and all of that. But in reality, as I reported, it's in over 130 countries. China has the same exact system as we do called Social Security. It is really being used as what I call the mark of the beast being the United Nations, because even Obamacare relies on the fact that you must have a Social Security number to receive the benefits that are implied by that. So what's happening across the world is the same sort of plan of action that is called Obamacare. It's just being implemented in here in the United States now, but for the most part, it's an international plan to get everybody they possibly can to accept this blemish, this mark, this number of the beast. And basically, if you look in Title 42, which is where Social Security really is, that's the health and welfare section of U.S. Code. Two words that are very deceiving, of course. You'll find, again, Section 666, which has to do with that mark and how it is going to be necessary to have that mark to buy and sell. So there's something way deeper about Social Security. We'll get into that when we get back. Stay tuned. folks, welcome back. Now, just to give you a brief history of the Social Security plan that was developed, it's important to first note that Social Security is not a United States creation. Very important to know that is, in fact, a creation of what was called, perhaps you're familiar with it, the League of Nations, which... and it was actually created, as far as Social Security, was created 8 years before it was actually passed in the United States. So if you go and you find something called the International Social Security Association, you can actually read about that from their website. It says promoting and developing Social Security worldwide. Quote, the International Social Security Association is the principal, we'll talk about what that means, principal international institution bringing together Social Security agencies and organizations. The ISSA's aim is to promote dynamic Social Security as the social dimension in a globalizing world by supporting excellence in Social Security administration. Founded in 1927, remember, it wasn't passed till 1935 in the United States. Founded in 1927, the ISSA has its headquarters at the International Labor Office in Geneva. Isn't that nice? The ISSA wishes to provide dynamic Social Security, which refers to Social Security systems that are accessible, keyword, sustainable, Agenda 21, adequate, socially inclusive, and economically productive, and that are based on performing well-governed, proactive, and innovative Social Security institutions. In line with the nature of the ISSA as an association of Social Security institutions, the vision of promoting dynamic Social Security ties Social Security improvements to the capacities and performances of these institutions. Of course, performance is another word. Now, as of, and it's still from the ISSA website, as of August 2013, the ISSA has 338 member organizations, 268 affiliate, and 70 associate in 159 countries and territories. The ISSA offers two types of membership, either an affiliate or an associate. Institutions, governments, departments, agencies, and other entities, non-international federations of these and that administer any aspect of Social Security are eligible for affiliate membership. Institutions not directly involved in the administration of Social Security, but whose objectives are compatible to those of the ISSA, may be admitted as members. So, yeah, that's really what we're talking about here. Now, it's also important to note that this is all being run, the Social Security Administration. It is the United Nations. Therefore, Social Security, what does it deal with? Well, it deals with money. Who's it being run by? Well, the World Bank, of course. It says this effort is very much supported by the World Bank. The Social Protection Unit, Social Protection Unit, as part of the Human Development Network, supports the World Bank and client countries to assist individuals, households, and communities to better manage the income and welfare risks that affect vulnerable groups. It talks about pensions, labor markets, disability, and social funds. And it then goes on to tell you what the Human Development Network is. It's the World Bank's home for policy, programs, and research in the fields of education, health, nutrition, and population. Ooh, population. We know what that means, don't we? Social protection, and labor, children and youth. Also HIV, AIDS, and development dialogue. This is all in the World Bank. It's Human Development Network. It finally says improving access to education, health, and social services to build a balanced and competitive societies. You see, they don't want United States to be a sovereign place where we can make our own stuff and not worry about the rest of the world. They want us to be a competitive place. Oh. Since the 1970s, the United States has established a network of bilateral Social Security agreements that coordinate the U.S. Social Security program with comparable programs of other countries. International Social Security agreements, often called totalization agreements, have two main purposes. First, they eliminate dual Social Security taxation. And second, the agreements help to fill gaps in benefit protection for workers. In other words, if you go to another country and you work, the United States is still going to come after you to pay its Social Security. So you don't have to pay it twice. You don't have to pay it there because you're a citizen of the United States. You see, this is the real Social Security. Now, Daniel, let's take apart these two words. What does social mean?
Well, that's being within an aggregate. It's very vague at times because if I'm socially involved with good people, moral people, that's not a bad thing. But what happens if I'm in an aggregate of a bunch of bad people run by a bunch of bad, evil people? And so when you're in a aggregate, you have to understand when we say we're part of anything, so whether someone says they're a member of the United States of America, a citizen of any of these places, they may be a victim of their own lack of knowledge in this, because victim means animal. It does not mean man or woman. So it's like an animal sacrifice, and therefore, when we get involved in this aggregate of people that have a blemish in their title or in their name, then we're sharing anything that goes on within that, and you do not have any private, what we call, I guess, inalienable position at that point, because you give that up in order to identify yourself within an aggregate of common participants. We have to understand, too, the word commoner meant prostitute. So here in Canada, we have a House of Commons. It means House of Prostitutes. We even have representatives to pimp our ride here in Canada. So we just use lawyers to work it all the way to the top. Surprisingly, you just coincidentally brought up a word earlier in your discussion, and you said population. You should have said population, because the surname belongs to the Pope.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in the dictionary I'm reading, it actually tells us under social, when it says, social pleasures, social benefits, social happiness, social duties, social interests and concerns, and it does say pertaining to or relating to men living in society or to the public as an aggregate body. Here's what it says. Listen to this. It says, this is a quote from the Pope, probably an older Pope, obviously, but true self-love and the word social are the same. True self-love and social are the same. So that would indeed make a lot of sense.
Yeah, the message, what they're doing is I'll
tell you what. Save that. We're going to go to a break, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned, folks. My guest today, Daniel, Christian Remedy in Law. I was just looking up the word social, and it says, first of all, it says pertaining to society. Well, what does that mean? It's body politic, right? And you go and you look. Any number of persons associated for a particular purpose, whether incorporated by law or only united by articles of agreement, a fraternity. A company, a temporary association of persons for profit or pleasure. In this sense, company is more generally used. A company or fellowship, a partnership or fellowship. Listen to this. A union on equal terms. Oh my, is that a can of worms when we talk about equal rights, which are directly opposed to equity under the natural law. My God. Persons, yes, persons, living in the same neighborhood who frequently meet in company and have fellowship. Literary society renders da-da-da-da-da-da. So, Daniel, I'm sorry, go ahead and continue. We're talking about the word social, again, pertaining to society. So it puts you in a group. Puts you in a body politic.
Again, we're dealing with basically using a title, using a name. This is the big problem I deal with most people because they say, I'm so proud of my surname. And I go, really? Well, the Bible says pride before a fall.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, pride before. Well, think about it. You people who are so proud of that name, they've put everything. They've literally bet the farm on that name. Literally put all of their future entitlements, their future welfare, their future health, everything they've put into a fiction, a name. That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
And when you look at that, if you just have mere belief in something, the law clearly states that mere belief can misrepresent a fact. So in other words, just because I carry a fact, something very factual, a given name, and I'd like to take my given name, which is a given, a fact, and I'd like to place it into something that's assumed to be a fact, even though we have no evidence to prove it's a fact. Well, assumption or assuming means to put on false appearance or deceit. Now, the crazy thing about this, I had this discussion with my wife the other day, and she says, how is everybody going to know all this, Dan? She goes, how are the people that are out there, the good people that are out there, didn't realize that they woke up into a really bad movie and that they've put their trust in men who run government, but the Bible says don't put your trust in men or princes, put your trust in God. In fact, in the movie Shawshank Redemption, the war den, who controls all the war names for the war rant people who war ranted their surname, that's a war symbol, said to the prisoners when they were being filed in, he says, basically, trust in God. He gives them a Bible. He says, but your ass belongs to me. Because you'd had to be part of the colony, the ass, to be part of the colony of the royalty that would have possibly enticed you into believing to trust in them.
Colony. You're so clever.
I'm sorry.
That's great, actually. I love it. Speaking of colony, of course, we the truth of the matter is that America, when it was first created for what it was before the Declaration and all of that, was really a colony, which actually means plantation or farm, and it was a penal colony because it was under penal law. So what do we get when we then put social onto the word security? That gets really interesting. Security, defined as protection, effectual defense or safety, freedom from fear or apprehension, confidence of safety, whence negligence in providing means of defense. Listen to this, folks, right out of the dictionary. Security is dangerous for the reasons I just said. Security is dangerous for it exposes men to attack when unprepared. Security in sin is the worst condition of the sinner. Man, that is a powerful, powerful statement, because what have we done? We have allowed the government to become our security. Therefore, we are completely unprepared against attack, although some of you certainly have your guns and storable food and all of that. But in reality, we are completely exposed to attack, because we rely on our United States to protect us. We have no real protection for ourselves. Security in sin is the worst condition of the sinner. So what is that saying? Well, that's referring to your protection provided by your false identity to allow you to do things that are sinful. I mean, it's your Social Security allows you to be a sinner. I mean, it's really, really quite incredible when you think about it.
Well, you look at it, Clint. We put inanimate, make-believe things we place value on in a vault or a safe. And we say now it's secure, only until some robber figures a way to crack the safe.
Mm.
But is it really secure? And you think about it, the more that someone has, the more paranoid they become, the more concerned they are protecting it. A man could store up a lot of things, but what's he going to do in the long run when, basically anybody could come by and take it?
Well, gee, I'll tell you what. I went through, I was making almost $100,000 a year when I was a sound designer in Hollywood. And, boy, when my identity got stolen, identity theft. So all of my accounts, I was getting loans, I was getting credit cards all through the mail. And like you said, I was dying to protect my identity, which isn't my identity. My credit score has nothing to do with me or my reputation. In fact, most crooks have the highest identity, credit scores, because they get a lot of money for their crimes. Right. And here's what it says, again, about security. Anything given or deposited to secure the payment of a debt or the performance of a contract, as a bond with surety, a mortgage, which is a dead pledge, the endorsement of a responsible man, and pledge. Wow, we've talked about all those words. I mean,
well, it's interesting, Clint, on the statement of birth records, at least in Ontario, and I think the wording's probably very similar in the United States on a lot of the records that are filled out, or the statement. It's like a statement account, because they're counting people. They're doing a poll tax. They're doing a census. Very negative thing if you look at the history of this in the Bible. So just don't get too warm and friendly if people are thinking censuses are great.
Is that the same thing as is that the same thing as a head tax?
Yes.
Which is not allowed.
And be careful when you try to behead, because they may behead you in the process under like a guillotine. Because guile and guillotine go together for being guilty of possibly doing something that's a crime or a tort. So basically, the statement of birth records have wordings that the division registrar puts the last little, signing on the document, never, of course, witnessing at the time the parent fills it in. So it's just like an informant filling in a statement, but there's really no one there to witness him signing the statement, because if it's incorrect, no one wants to be the one witnessing that to go down with it. So usually you'll find the division register signing a day after the actual record has actually been signed, or at least put in by the parent. And remember, an informant, which is what the parent is declared as, or at least labeled as, is a denouncer, not someone who renounces something, someone who denounces something. So the informant, being the parent, puts down something in there which seems to be renouncing something, possibly maybe renouncing their inalienable position, in a sense, and then putting down something that is only alleged to be true. And therefore, the division register signs that shortly after the parent puts that information down based on mere belief. And therefore, it leads to the problem that we're talking about here, because we're taking an assumption of this title that we thought was ours, and we're taking into account that the words that were on that document seem to give us the go-ahead to use the surname that's on that statement of birth. All
right, sorry to cut you off. We got to go to the breaks.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Or maybe if I press this button. Imagine every person that you see is somewhat different from every other person in the world.
All right, folks, welcome back. So, I just kind of had a little realization that, the word protection is kind of a funny word. Of course, the whole contractual situation is basically that you have obligations to government, and its obligation is to protect. But what is it actually protecting? Well, actually, it's not you. It's protecting its own property. It's protecting its persons, which it has patented and copyrighted and owns. So it's not really protecting you. It's protecting the continuity of the artificialness of it. Now, we said that the word colony actually means plantation or farm, and that most men were indentured to that prison, if you will, the open-air prison in the United States. What is the last definition of security? Well, it's interesting because, in truth, here's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. The International Social Security System, or the association, the fact that Social Security is in all the first world countries, is literally to control people. It has no other purpose. It is designed for the following reason. Here's what the dictionary says. Security is something given or done to secure peace or good behavior. Violent and dangerous men are obliged to give security for their good behavior or for keeping the peace. This security consists in being bound with one or more sureties in a recognizance to the king or state. That's from Blackstone, actually. So really, what government has done, again, is to get you to put all of your eggs in one basket. All right, your investments, those go into the pension funds, which, the same as Social Security. Your retirement, your Social Security retirement, your benefits, your health benefits, everything has been put into this security, the state of security of the person. And for that reason, we all stay peaceful because we are all vested within a system that basically requires our servitude for us to get the benefits that it owes us. And of course, servitude means extortion, exaction, basically anything they want to do. And that is a horrific thought when you think about it, Daniel.
Well, again, if we look at the beginning of this, because it'll lead to where we got to this, because we didn't get to the social insurance program without having a birth record. Because remember, you're using something through the whole process of your life. Say you're going down the road. Would an officer of the law, I call him an officer, okay, because technically, if the world's in bankruptcy since what we've understood since 1933, all the nations have been under bankruptcy protection. Then basically it would totally make sense when the officer is trying to arrest someone who thinks that he's basically off ice and he needs an officer to pull him over, which means you're liquid. That means you're not frozen, because usually during a bankruptcy the accounts are frozen the last time I checked. So he says freeze. So he's trying to freeze you. And we always say we're going to ice the guy, right? I don't think people understand the words that are out there. And we've had callers before we know that have called in who actually have got onto this code. But it's not really hidden. It's in front of us and we don't see it. So in the beginning on the statement of birth record, what happens is after the parent puts in what they believe to be a title that belongs to them. The last signer on it says, "I am satisfied to the sufficiency and correctness." So what happens is satisfied means paid. So it means it's paid. So whatever they require, they got it anyway. It's paid. That's why generally when you pay a debt, it's usually considered to be discharged. The problem what's going on out there, if we look at what goes on in the world, everybody that gets attacked out there in some way for something that they appear to be doing wrong, they get charged. But I just found out that when the birth record was filled out, they said that everything was satisfied and paid, so it's discharged. So my birth record, the statement of account said I was discharged at birth, and we know we're discharged from our mother's womb. So why are we being charged? And of course, charges are on surname. They're on the emblem or the coat of arms, which we call fees. They're basically symbolization, in a way, of attaching ourselves to something that we were discharged from the duty, debt, and obligation to carry. So the only thing under bankruptcy protection anybody could be left with is their own private personal property, which is your given name. So it appears when we were discharged from their system, the only thing we were left with was our given name. So we'd be civilly dead. So all the citizens, technically, are civilly dead with the vouching, certified, signing authority of someone else who's not them, who vouches for them, on a wallet-sized birth certificate that says they're discharged, they're civilly dead. The problem is, they said, why don't you take your civilly dead certificate and why don't you apply to the creditor that we're under bankruptcy protection with, and why don't we go back in charge, and then why don't you go out there and try to make something that's civilly dead live and go out and make a living? And I think that if people will play back this recording of what we just said right now, they will have a total understanding of what's going on. They have been duped, induced into labor. They even induce women into labor in the hospital.
Yeah.
It's pretty sick. What your surname really is an after-acquired property. I call it AIDS. It's after-acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Because you actually acquired it after your true birth, not knowing who you really are. And so you take on a defective title, which appears you've committed treason to God and put your trust in men, who control the surname, control the Roman debtor name that leads right back up to the Pope.
Well, this goes into the concept that, all debt, you can't pay a debt by discharging. And that seems to be in banking how debts are paid, is a discharge of the debt, because you're paying with basically a promise to pay, which is the dollar. So it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Again, how do you pay a bill with a bill? Someone gives you a bill, and what we do is move around $5 bills, $20 bills, $100 bills. And in fact, if people are filling in their tax returns, I mean, why would they be filling in that they made anything, considering the fact that all they ever received as income was actually a negative, which was a debt? So they should be putting a negative, but they keep on putting a positive on the return, showing they're making money. No wonder they're being chased.
Right. Oh, crazy stuff. Well, we're going to get a break here, the long break for station identification. And when we get back, now that we kind of know what Social Security really, really is, and the fact that it's being used across the world to mark every single one of us and basically throw us into a system of complete dependence, including the medical aspect that we're all complaining about. We'll come back and we'll see what we can do about getting rid of this thing. Now, if you want to pull up a form, the official form by Social Security that I've mentioned before is SSA 521, which is the official form to withdraw your original application, which wasn't even your application in the first place. Of course, it was done by your parents. But I've heard from many people that you should never actually use a government form, that you should go to the laws themselves, the codes, and figure out the best way to write the same thing without actually using a form. Or, for that matter, is it even necessary, because this is another question, to actually get rid of, or can you get rid of the Social Security, considering it's not yours in the first place? Is it necessary to even tell them you don't want to use it anymore? Just stop using it, including the driver's license and everything else. So there's a little, confusion in this area. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men. Machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. Guest today is Daniel, Christian Remedy and Law on YouTube. You can search for that and find all kinds of great, short, to-the-point, succinct videos by Daniel. You'll find out that he's a big old mountain man with a big scruffy beard. I'm actually, my beard is embarrassing compared to yours, actually, Daniel. So we've touched on the two real frightening documents, the birth certificate, of course, and the Social Security. Those are the two things that are really if we're going to call the documents that founded the United States, if we're going to call them the founding documents, well, then I guess we're going to call the Social Security and the birth certificate, we're going to call them the secularization documents, the secularizing, converting from regular to secular, to converting from spiritual to secular. Here's the deal, Daniel, and this is the question that I get most often, and the question that I have myself, to be perfectly frank. And I'm sure it's a question that you've thought a lot about, too. So I wanted to get your humble opinion on this. Now, sure. What we do is we continuously use our Social Security number and our name, our surname, and we get into, we basically create more and more obligations, more contracts, unilateral contracts. Of course, when you sign a contract with government, there's no man there to sign it, so you're just basically signing a unilateral contract, which means one, and lateral means give away. So you're giving away basically everything except for an acceptance of a benefit, giving up your rights, basically, your natural rights. And so what we have, I mean, we've discussed youth, and then we turn 18. We suddenly start taking all this upon ourselves. We say, okay, I'm going to join selective service because, hey, I'm supposedly required to do this, which of course means you're registering yourself to be drafted, to be a soldier of fortune. In other words, a soldier for pay, the worst kind. You're registering your car. You're registering your house. Hell, you are registered yourself making you a tenant of hell. So, I mean, basically, you've got a problem of registration. I mean, licenses, all these different things, your home, your land ownership, your permits, and all of these things. So what the heck is the remedy? What, we say Christian remedy in law, but what is the process? Do we actually have to get rid of these things in an official capacity, or do we just vacate them and no longer claim that we are the surety? My opinion, of course, is that you have to pay off all the debts that you've accumulated and be in satisfaction and in good standing so that you can actually leave so that you don't have any obligations left, so that you can actually leave. And I say leave no page underturned. In other words, overturn all of the contracts. So, what is your process, or as you call it, remedy for all of this?
Okay. Well, if we look at the beginning, we always have to look at the beginning. That's why I always go back to the statement and consider the statement of birth record as the beginning of all this. Because, there's no existence before this. Nothing's happening. Let's look at the reality here. There's a record that's been filled out by the parents. Well, we're not even going to say we know the majority of parents have had no understanding of law. Unfortunately, the good book that the United States was at least allegedly founded on states that if a man doesn't know the law, he'll die like a beast. So, unfortunately, I don't want to die like an animal, so I said I better start to understand the law. And in the statement of birth record that the parents filled out, they just were in a mere belief that they had the use of a title. They gave what they thought they had the use of, and the one who signed off on it, the division registrar, said that everything was satisfied and paid. Done. Everything is paid. So just what you just said earlier, you said you want to satisfy the debt. It was satisfied. So you were discharged, okay? And the only thing that was left over after that record was done was really your given name. So technically, even though the law could not require on a legal document your given name, because your given name is not legal. They kind of use, it's almost like a reaching too far on the part of a civil government to go and attach something that really they don't have jurisdiction over. So we have transcripts from court records that say there is no provision in the Canadian law for anybody to convey or transfer their given name to any person, corporation, or trust. And the registrars of all the birth records are categorized as a person, corporation, and trust. And therefore, any document purporting to transfer, convey, or lien your given name would be in itself invalid. And notarizing it or putting funny seals on it and all the wonderful things we do with them does not make it valid. So in other words, if in the event you believe that your birth record was able to transfer God's property, I don't think God needs to register his property with man, into man's imagination. Well, then therefore the given name is not their property, it's private. It belongs to God, it's your God-given inalienable position. But if you like to place by consent and voluntary action your God-given inalienable position and start entering into contracts that would seem almost impossible to transfer it, but it's not impossible in man's law, they just let you do it. So you start to attach to the wrong side. And you go and place your consent that's inalienable on top of an alienable thing, and you say, I'll be surety for that surname. And if that surname means debtor, which it does, then you become the debtor. And it's as simple as that. So to get out of what you're talking about, you got to remove your consent from everything you've ever done with your inalienable name. It does not belong to them. Tell them to remove it from everything. but you can't talk to them in the combination name because you never had right to the title name that you took on, the surname.
You're using it.
It's the property of the pagan monarchy, Pope, Vatican, who does not care anything about other than you paying royalties and fees while you consent. If you do not know who your God is, then your God will be the Pope. And you'll be calling Popa. And that's why it's very Pope-ish, ish is man, very pop-ish, which means to drive, to use that name is to say that you belong to a pagan, unbelieving nation with no covenant with the true God. Therefore,
all right, so really, it's not a pop culture; it's a Pope culture. We'll be back, folks.
You want some more?
It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water, like water. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
All right, folks, welcome back. So, Daniel, it sounds like you're of a similar opinion to me, although I don't know if we're of the same ideas of processing the data. But I mean, basically, if you've taken upon and are the user participating in usury with your sort of automaton artificial person structure, and you're participating in society and you've racked up debt, you know, within that name in person, well then, you know, can you really then separate yourself as the surety for that person after you've participated in the fraud?
Yes.
If you still have a debt?
Consider it, I think the listeners need to go look at the word quit claim. If I quit claiming something, then I no longer would have the debt. So in other words, say, for instance, I'm claiming something in a name that doesn't belong to me, but it appears I've been induced to take it on with some benefits and privileges. We'll call that pension and all the things you talked about before that seems to be in the Social Security program. Good inducement, right? Inducement to commit fraud, to imposter something, imposter, take on the duty, debt, and obligation of something that's not really yours, but you said you'll surety it. And suretyship is the precursor to the ruin of society. Because if I'm not really the one in debt and then I take it on, and I have no means to pay off what is the debt of another because I really don't have access to it, I'm just basically taking on something that may be like a escalator that keeps on, you know, going downward and I'm going upward, but I don't seem to ever be able to pay it off because it's being increased by the one controlling the debt at any given moment. I consider that to be a suicide. That's why custom is defined as suicide. So I'm sure you've driven into parking lots that I have that said customer parking, correct?
Yeah.
How the heck did I end up being a customer paying customs if I'm a native? Oh, maybe I'm using an alternative name. They even have the natives now using terms like AB originals. Aboriginal, not original. Because AB means not. Away from. Original. Why don't they just call them originals, but they put on a term called aboriginals and give them status? They just let them pay less tax. They got duped too. It's an unfortunate situation of lack of knowledge and comprehension. You have what is private. That is your given name. You've entered into the public, which is tax. If you take your private out of the public, it's called an early withdrawal.
Well, so you're saying that people who are, I mean, obviously we're all considered debtors to the bankruptcy of the United States, and the debt in this case can never possibly be paid. So obviously it's a false sort of debt or system of debt. But you're saying that if I, let's say, have I don't know, $10,000 in credit cards, bills, and let's say $100,000 loan on my home, and let's say a $50,000 student loan. That's certainly not my position, but I know a lot of people out there have racked up credit cards and done other things. Are you saying you can? Well, I mean, to look at the word "quit" means to discharge or to carry through, and of course,
it also comes from quiet, and you have the inalienable position from God to have quiet enjoyment of the planet and the earth, the promised land. Why would I promise to pay for something that I was given for free?
Okay. Well, okay. So let's say your debt is to another quote unquote person. Then let's say you're.
It.
What do you mean relinquish it?
Relinquish is to abandon, forsake. In fact, the key code in the Luke 14 and 33 for those that are, I believe, viewers of the 1828 Noah Webster's Dictionary, which was really founded at least on the idea that there was biblical, support in the dictionary. He gave better wording because he didn't give you a biblical rendering for forsake in his 1828, but he did give you a synonym in relinquish. So what it looks like is you've been given a grant to an office to hold debt. That's your surname. They just granted you the right to use the surname. Remember, be careful what you take for granted.
Well, the question I have is that if you were to do this, how is it, the definition for honor in this system is, of course, to not pay a debt. And since we can never pay our debt, we're all sinners. We're all we're debtors. So if I were to not pay a debt to a contractor or to an agency, a bank, whatever, is that not a dishonorable thing?
No,
I mean, what happens?
Not in a sense. It's called amending things. You can always amend something. Amen? And if I'm not the one on the title and I'm not the signing authority, here's where I'm going to give you what I believe to be is truth at the level I can see it at the moment. If the certificates that you carry, remember, everything you've used in your life had to be basically certified and vouched by somebody else. No one would believe who you are anyways, even if you tried to tell them. So the officer on the road wouldn't care if I told him I was John, Dave, Robert, with the name Smith, Taylor, or anything else. He wants to see somebody else's certified approval of it, a certification. Almost like what you do to approve a vehicle to go on the road. So if they need a certification, whose signature is on every certification that you have ever basically used in order to obtain any of this credit that you went and thought you could sign for?
Well, that's obviously
you
your own.
The birth certificate.
Yeah.
So those signing authorities are basically called allographs. That means they're signatories. You weren't party to the contract or anything else that was involved in the records that were placed before you even came into existence.
Well, plus there was no signature by government either, generally, or by the bank, or. Go ahead.
So the listeners can go to Black's Law, go to 3rd edition, 4th edition in the United States. I get a lot of heck of this in Canada because people in Canada, lawyers are a bunch of dummies up here. I wouldn't have them sweep my floors, but they basically go, "Oh, that's American law." Okay, fine. Well, let's go down. I'm on basically the air with an American, I guess, listenership. Well, the Black's Law Dictionary is based more on American law. States that signature, you can use a signature already written for you. It can be cut, pasted, cut from one document and added to another. Why don't you just go and start putting the proper signature that was the certified signature and signing authority and surety for whatever version of the name they said they wanted you to use? Because it appears that you can't vouch for yourself. You need someone to vouch for you.
All right. Hold that thought. We'll be back. Not sure if you've answered my question or not. We'll see. Stay tuned.
And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart. Closer to the heart. The blacksmith and the artist.
All right, folks, welcome back. So, of course, I'm in my dictionary again, burying my head in all these things. I'm just looking at different versions of the word quit and quit claim. All of them basically, the word quit has a very specific meaning to discharge. The word quittance, the noun, says discharge from a debt or obligation or an acquittance. So again, discharge from debt or acquittance. So what is acquittance? Well, then we go and we, of course, look up that word and we find another noun, which again says a discharge or release from debt. It's interesting because acquittal is kind of the same. Acquittal, a judicial setting free, a deliverance from the charge of an offense as by a verdict by a jury or a sentence of the courts. So, kind of the same thing there, isn't it? You're basically stating that you are not guilty of the debt that is a burden upon the state's property, which is your name.
Okay, Clint, very simply, let's go to the word signature, Black's Law. We know a lot of listeners have access to this. I'm just quoting out of the 5th edition. I've got copies from the 4th, the 3rd. I have is what I have available, and I'm saying I'm sure that there's listeners out there who may have access to even more information. But let's look at what the word signature is, because that's everything you do. Consider that a check that you sign, okay? And I always be very careful of the word sign because you don't pronounce the word G in sign, so I consider it a sin, depending on what you're signing for. Okay, so when you're signing something, there's always a flat line, correct? There's nothing on the line, right? It's just a flat line that's on the paper.
Well, it depends because you do have the dotted line, which actually says authorized signature.
As full as we can, but we'll just say it appears to be a flat line, not something with anything on it.
Okay.
And when someone's flatlining, they're dead, right?
Okay.
And then when you put the flourish on there, you ever seen someone in the hospital and they have the heart meter on them?
Yeah.
It looks like a kind of a flourish, almost like that cursive writing thing we do.
I was going to ask you about that because the word curse is in cursive. So when you sign, you're signing in cursive.
It's the curse of the law.
Yeah.
If you don't know who your God is, you better realize that you may be on the wrong law, and that wrong law may be giving you something that you're going to be paying a debt for torting or using someone else's property without basically paying the fee for it. So, anyways, the word signature, when you put it on there, when you actually put the signature on, it's almost like a flourish. So we've been trained through public education to do cursive writing. And cursive writing basically has very snaky-like writing, very serpent-like writing, where we join letters together. Okay, and we bring things together that may not belong, but we're going to do it in a signature. And that's like the heartbeat, because there's nothing we've ever done in our life that ever got us in a debt without that heartbeat. So your social security card, your social insurance card, puts a signature on there, and that signature is on a numbered card with a government symbol, because technically they're really not going to try to put a trademark, at least evidently, on that. It's a trademark with your signature using something that appears to be someone else's property with numbers and letters and whatnot. Funny enough, in Canada, the back of the social insurance cards, actually, some of them say, this card does not authorize you to work in Canada.
Well, yeah, I mean, they actually say when you get the new Social Security card or replacement card here, it says this is not your property, it's property of the Social Security Administration.
Well, there again, it would mean nothing. It doesn't mean it has anything to do with the nation you're with. It just means someone's a third party collecting tax based on a foreign debt that's been borrowed upon, based on something that, again, the arms, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, so the arms represent death, and therefore, because most of the coat of arms that people bear in their family names represent going to war to die. So therefore, you pledge debt, mortgage, dead pledge, and you pledge your life in that dead body for the purpose of debt or anything else, whether it be war or money and title. So signature in Black's Law says the act of putting one's name at the end of an instrument to attest its validity. Well, many of the things we do, we're signing for and attesting something's validity. But the thing you used before you could do that had someone else's signature on it. Now, whatever told us we could take the government documents that were given to us from our parents who may not have known anything, and then go and take, I didn't get a notice at 18 to say, go and start signing and taking over the Deputy Registrar General's signature for the birth registration system. No one ever told me that I was supposed to be the one signing.
No, because I got a little note in my Christmas stocking. Santa delivered that to me. Saint Nick. He told me all about it.
So it says a signature may be written by hand, printed, stamped, typewritten, engraved, photographed, or cut from one instrument and attached to another, and a signature lithographed on an instrument by a party is sufficient for the purpose of signing it, it being immaterial with what kind of instrument a signature is made. And whatever mark, symbol, or device one may choose to employ as representative of himself is sufficient. Well, I would say that the Deputy Registrar General, who signs the birth certificate that had nothing to do with you anyways, seems to be as sufficient and correct as it possibly could be, because there's no possible way you were involved in anything to do with any record that was involved with you having the use of that surname. So the problem what's happening is, if I want to go and pay someone's debt, I don't think that the banker cares. But if the signing authority to the debt is only involved in a bankruptcy, which is a discharge, and I don't put the proper discharge signature down, I'm going to end up getting the bill because I've gone contrary to the will, because the short form of will is bill. And I'm sure that most of the Americans listening right now that have gone contrary to the will that says you're not the signing authority for that name are getting the bill, and they will be ill.
What do you mean?
How more ill you could be in the United States when I found out how many trillions of dollars that nation right now, let alone Canada, is in debt because people keep on trying to get in the way of discharging the bill. They say they can pay it. I'll join the third party. I won't be part of the certificate that has someone else's signing authority for me. I will take signing authority. I'll take it over. That's a takeover. Okay, that's not very humble. And therefore, I'll work for the creditor and say, oh, tell you what, creditor, I'll work for you. And because under contract law, the nations passed legislation way back when in the 1700s that allowed parties to contract
right.
even with a nation and its peoples, even despite they may be enemies, as long as the government approved it.
And that's
all the Americans and Canadians are enemies of the state because they have joined the third party. They're working for the creditor that is supposed to maintain the bankruptcy.
And that's important because what that really means is that you have no quote-unquote protection from government in this. Now, what is, when you refer to the discharge signature, what does that mean?
That means that's whoever is on your birth certificate. So if you have that, you're able to place that on any document. What are they going to do? Arrest the general? Arrest the military? The military is far more superior than any flunky officer on the road who doesn't know this because he's doing the same wrong thing every day when he goes home. Because he doesn't know. He's only enforcing what he thinks, but if you keep on signing things, you're an enemy of the state, so therefore you're basically someone who's committed treason and is not following the bankruptcy procedures, which says that the Pope has signing authorities. And they created them to be generals. Believe it or not, all the high-end Jesuit authorities are generals. So they work in your attorney general's offices.
Right.
And they're signing signatures under the Register of Generals have registered their own pagan fiction birth of who you are. And
okay, let's continue this. Just got one segment left. Probably won't take calls because I've still got questions. We'll be back.
Living in the street. Oh, there's a solution. Did you see the frightened ones? Did you hear the falling bombs? Did you ever wonder why we had to run for shelter when the promise of a brave new world unfurled beneath the clear blue sky?
All right, folks, welcome back. Yes, we just had a caller, Daniel, and please continue with where you left off, but he was curious at your use, correct or incorrect. And when I look up the definition, they mean the same thing, and it's very tough for me to distinguish between the two. But right. he was saying that you were using the word inalienable as opposed to the words unalienable. Now, what do you think of that?
Okay. I'm going to say insane versus unsane. I don't know. These are things that we've adopted in there. I've gone through this before. I've even had a caller to ask me for help out of Montreal, Canada, and we went into this. But I'm saying when I researched inalienable and unalienable, it led to the same thing.
That's my conclusion.
The definitions seem to lead to the same meaning, and therefore I could quote out of the dictionaries on both sources and come up with. I could still stand my place and position using that word in a court of law. So when I look up inalienable in Oxford, I look up inalienable in Noah Webster's, which says unalienable.
Yeah.
These are getting into either kind of ideas, and I think there's nothing to be gained by it. But I do not judge the listener for being careful because it's a very paranoid society right now with what we say that comes out of our mouth.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the word smart, and you say, I'm very smart, I go, well, I feel bad for you because that means injury.
Right.
Smart,
but there again, if you're going to say the word endure,
mind.
If you're going to say the word endure, then why would you say inalienable? It would almost sound like independence. I'm in a state of dependence, or so and there might be some merit to it. However, I haven't. And
I'm just saying, if it feels better to put the word on, I'm more comfortable. I'd be honest with you. I'm more comfortable with unalienable than inalienable.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a good
thing. On that, because is completely opposite too. But we've kind of adopted things It'd be almost like using the word, I know we don't use it in individual, but undividual would probably be better, because we're not in divide. We are divide because we are separate. According to Scripture, the believers are separate. They're set apart from the world. World meaning the adorned or decorated, embellished fiction of man's imagination government.
All right, well, so let's get back, because I really want to get this in the most basic, fundamental form here. When we say we're going to quit claim something, I asked you, how is that an honorable place to be? When you're quit claiming, now to a bank, I can understand, because the bank doesn't really loan you any of its own money. You create the money with your quote unquote signature, and then it gives you a contract that you're going to pay back that money. Now, one person I heard on a recent little video I watched, he said, "Hey, go get a home loan, get a note, and as soon as that note is finished, you go and you bring it up to the counter, or the same bank, and you sign the back, and you present it as a basically an accepted for value type of thing, but and cash it. If they don't cash it, then it's not a valid note. So they have to cash it, or they're in fraud, and you just give them the money, and your note is paid off. You got your house."
I got an easier one. Why don't you put the version of the name on the purchase agreement that you're buying the property with? So take the ambiguous, unclear certificate version of the name for the purchaser. You ever seen a purchase in a vendor and purchaser agreement? You'll notice it just says name. Okay? So then take the certificate that you have as the birth certificate wallet size. It just says name. It doesn't say given name or surname. Amazingly, they must have run out of ink when they were running those versions of the wallet-size birth certificate, because it doesn't say clearly given name, surname.
Yeah.
So why don't we just say that we'll use that certificate version of the name, and we'll put that as the purchaser. And so you put that name version. Now, I know it's going to show up as a name in reverse. So the birth certificates generally in most places will show up as, if we're going to use the word, let's just say John Doe, it'll be Doe, John.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll say name, purchaser, Doe, John. Well, they're going to require a signature at the end of that agreement, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to require a valuable consideration. Why don't you give them a copy of the birth certificate? I guess it's as valuable as it's going to get. So you give them a certified copy of something that vouches for the name that you can vouch for, because how does your signature enter into any of this? How ridiculous is the idea of our signature? Is there some signature of us in the record from the beginning when they took our footprint and blood sample? At the hospital, did they really actually get the child's hand to sign something?
All they got from me was baby food, diarrhea, and vomit.
You got it. So, at the end, there was nothing there, and someone else has signed. So the state signed for its own state property. Remember, statistics may lie.
Yeah.
But someone else at least will sign for the lie, because I was incapable of lying at that age.
Well, so let's say that you and I have I'm a corporation, or I'm a contractor, and you have a contract with me, and you say that you're going to quit claim me. We only have a couple minutes, but you're going to quit claim me. You're going to just quit that debt. You've got a $10,000 debt because I built a roof or a deck for you.
Amend the contract and let them know that when you quit claim, you weren't the authorized signature for the contract.
But then isn't...
And you can amend the contract and place the authorized signature, which is the signature that was on your birth certificate.
But then does this person not lose out?
No, it discharges the debt, and believe me, someone from the government has to come forward under the Bankruptcy Act to come through there and discharge that debt, because technically you misrepresented it by mistake.
But so you're saying that he can what, write it off as a quit claim or a discharge, or that he will get paid?
The world that they're all under bankruptcy protection. There is no money.
Right.
Okay. It's just an entity entertaining people to believe that they do own. And unfortunately now the debt's got so large because people have been putting their signature versus the signature on their birth certificate on every duty, debt, obligation, and claim that they've ever signed. That signature should have been on driver's licenses. That should have been on the Social Security card. That should have been on everything they've ever done because they were never able to prove their signatory authority for anything from the beginning. It's all someone else's imagination. So stick their imagination on every single document with their imagination signature. Webster's Dictionary defines signature as deputy's handwriting. Well, there's a deputy signature for the registrar of birth records, and therefore the deputy registrar's signature is party to every contract when you make them party to it. But when you leave the party, you join the third party, and you no longer have the protection of the government, who's under bankruptcy protection. So therefore you say, give me all the debt. I'll pay for it. I'll be surety for another.
Well, so still, how does the contractor, myself, after you've done this, how do I satisfy the materials and everything else? Sorry?
Right to the beginning, right down to when we're talking about banking, our original banking, anything we've ever done, has been placing our signature and not the authorized signature. We've been placing our signature versus the one that was on the voucher or the one that vouches for us, which is the birth certificate or the authorized signatures that occur on those documents. We've been placing the wrong signature, which is ours. I mean, how do we show up in there to prove that we have anything? We're just someone who says, I'll work and labor and take over the debt, but there's no background on us. We have no way to prove anything.
All right, well, we're going to have to continue this, I guess, next week, unfortunately. Thanks again for joining me today, Daniel. Christian Remedy and Law on YouTube, and we'll be here tomorrow with Freeman Bert from Colorado. See you later.